Hey guys, what's going on? Hope you're having a good day. This is part 2 of my query decomposition and query augmentation mini series. Before diving into some of the examples and things like that I wanted to chat about, I wanted to go over kind of a quick real world example. I got asked about this a bunch in the Discord. Um, Around kind of why we have to do this, like why query decomposition makes sense based on the models that we want to use. So I wanted to show like a real quick example of why this makes sense, and then dive into the examples like we chatted about. So you will see right here, I've created a little example script that I'm going to use to mimic the retrieval process. So we can see here we have our query. Here, this thing is a chunk of an FAQ document for REST APIs. And one of the things that I mentioned before is that when we are doing our retrieval, when we are comparing the input query to the documents that we have in a knowledge base and then ranking them based on similarity, the reason why we want to use query decomposition is if our query coming from a user or something like that has multiple topics in it or multiple ideas or something like that, that when we do the semantic similarity comparison, that all these different topics kind of bog each other down and you don't get a high similarity score when we compare to any of the documents. Now, if we had a document in our knowledge base that was, specifically answers what are multimodal models, how do I use them in a chain, and then how do I turn that chain to REST API, then like, of course, yeah, you would get a high similarity when comparing the query to it. But that's not something that you want to rely on. It's not something that really makes a lot of sense. What you want to do is you want to break the query down into different topics and compare each of the topics or sort of the subqueries to the knowledge base, pull chunks in that are related to that specific subquery, and then generate your answer. And I wanted to show that this is actually something that from a retrieval accuracy score is real. Because I did get asked about that a little bit. So here's our query. Here's a document chunk for just how to create a REST API. So let's say we had a REST API in our database. This comes from one of the REST API providers or something like that. So if we compare this query to that, we will see what our cosine similarity score is. We can see it is 38%, or a 0.38 score. That's not super high, but I mean, quite honestly, like it really depends on the rest of the chunks that you have in your document or in your knowledge base, but generally that's not going to be a super high score. And as I mentioned, as we'll see, like this is because when we compute the vector for this sentence, it's all of the tokens, it's all of the words in that sentence, which is going to bring down the accuracy because there's stuff in there not related to REST APIs when we compare to this one. That is only about APIs, or sorry, REST APIs. If we just do this, so now we can see really the only topic we, if you wanted to say this was two topics, I guess you could. If you just wanted to say this just one topic, just REST APIs, you could say that as well. So we saw 38%. And look, now they're 50% similar, a 12% increase in semantic similarity because there's less topics in there. Now this sentence, when you think about how many words in that sentence are focused only on REST APIs, it is a higher percentage than the one before. And so when we compare these you know, sort of queries to the chunks, it's not some sort of like keyword based comparison or something like that. It is an aggregate score of all of the tokens in the sentence compared to that chunk as well. You know, if we did something like, you know, now let's say, so this is what we did before. Let's say now we did this. So now even a bigger percentage is related to chain, smaller percentage is equal to REST API. You know, we get kind of the same score. Chain twice doesn't really do anything. That doesn't change the, you know, we don't have different terms in there or anything like that. But we can see that it is much higher than when we have all of these in here. And we want to compare to that. Let's say we had, these tokens. You know, we'll probably get something as well that still higher than the 38% that we saw before. It is lower than what we saw, but that's also partially because I think we have more tokens here than we had in the sentence we just compared to. But we can see it is still higher than the original sentence that had all these other topics, all these other ideas in there. And we do end up with a score that is higher when you remove those. So that is literally the reason we do this query decomposition and query augmentation. We are trying to break this down into subqueries that better compare to the actual knowledge base chunks that we have in our database. And normally what that looks like is breaking it down into say 2 or 3 subqueries, comparing and retrieving for each of those subqueries, pulling that information in via retrieval, and answering the question based on, you know, a couple different chunks that are related to different topics, and the LLM's goal is to combine that into an answer. So I wanted to show that real quick because I got asked about it. But now we can dive into what we actually want to look at. So let's take a look at an example prompt for query decomposition. This is an example that is provided by Langchain. They have a guide that walks you through a lot of the query decomposition steps. This is their example prompt. We'll talk through it. A couple things I like, a couple things I don't like. But we'll take a look at it, run some examples. So you're an expert at converting user questions into database queries. You have access to a database of tutorial videos about a software library for building LLM-powered applications. Perform query decomposition. Given a user question, break it down into distinct sub-questions that you need to answer in order to answer the original question. If there are acronyms or words you're not familiar with, do not try to rephrase them. So, couple things I like. I like the overall structure of this. So you have sort of like a rules section that you could add to here. And this is a really good rule because the LLM is going to try to change some of these acronyms, or at least provide like, you know, like it might try to do like something like this, where it says like REST API and then it says like, you know, application, program, interface, or something like that, which we don't need. If we're doing, you know, a query search, we don't really need that. So that part I actually do kind of like. It has sort of a, you know, high level like what you're doing. That's perfectly fine. I don't really have a problem with that. This, I like that it has a section in general that explains kind of what the source is. I'm trying to think of a better way to say that other than that, but you know, sort of like what you're searching and things like that. Now, I don't like the way that it wrote this, but I like that it has this section as a prompt piece in general. I think that's, you know, fine. And then you have this one, which is sort of like your instructions, you know, perform query decomposition. Of course, you need to have that. Given a user question, break it down into distinct sub-questions that you need to answer. This I don't love. I do like, of course, break down into distinct sub-questions, but there's probably better ways to write this because the LLM isn't answering the question; it's just breaking it down. maybe I'd like something related to search, like, break it down into distinct sub questions that would, break it down into distinct sub questions that enhance searchability related to the original question. Something like that, something to deal with like, hey, we're using this to search, so you should write this in a style that affects search. But there's, I like that it has this section. And then in the user one, we provide the question and we get a result. Now I'm gonna kind of ignore the results for now. We'll run a couple examples, but the one major sort of issue that I see is there's nothing in there about deciding if we need to do query decomposition or not. So like, let's say we had this input, for example. Let me grab this. Let's say this was our input. How to do RAG. We don't need to do anything here. Like, there's really nothing to decompose. Like, there's one topic and there's 4 words. Like, there's just really nothing to do. It's a clean question, which when we talk about like FAQ and stuff like that, is a better semantic match. And when we run this, we get like this. Like this isn't like this is kind of what my problem was. Like, these are like questions. They're not like search queries or like search titles. They're longer than the original question. Like, this isn't decomposition. And these aren't really good. Like, this is not a search query. So you could see how kind of by the way that it defines a task and then the way that this sentence is structured, I don't really like it. There's nothing we should do here with this one. Like, there's nothing that's needed. I'm saying that not knowing what's in the knowledge base, but this is a clear enough example that like really nothing needs to be done here. So it performs. Let me try another one here. We'll see how we do. This one's a little bit more complex. See if we like it. But this is a clear example of like, if I were like testing this, I would say like my prompt doesn't work because this is such a clearly incorrect answer, just even based on the structure. And this is okay. I don't really like these are good. This one's kind of useless, so it's okay. You will notice I'm testing a smaller model. I quite honestly was hoping that a smaller model would do a little bit better with this task, because when you get into the bigger models, you see a lot more reinforcement learning. And so you get a lot more of those responses that we saw with that how to do RAG question. So I don't really love, a bigger model. Maybe it works better. It's probably worth testing. Yeah, see, it's no better. These are just not. They're just not like, they're not database style, like semantic style searches. So let's see if we can like clean this up a little bit. So this, you're an expert converting user questions into database. I'll do search queries. I think that's a tad better. I think that will help a little bit with the. Actually, I'm gonna do. Let's see how it does with this. You have access to a database of. I don't know. I guess if Langchain really only had videos, then I guess we'd stick with videos. I don't really love my knowledge base just having videos. You have access to a database of tutorial videos and articles. I like the articles better, but I'll leave the videos one in there. Why not? This is going to be the first thing. So with this, like, we don't need this to do query decomposition. So I want to include stuff to say, you only have to do it if you need it. So let's do like if required. Let's see how it does with this. It's okay. I'm trying to work with their original prompt, which I don't really love, but we'll see. We'll see the changes I would actually like to make this a tad better. Let's run. Let's see how this looks. See how this one does. It gave me a bunch of other stuff. I just don't like. Let's go back to 3.5. A little bit of a smaller model. I don't like that at all. I uh, uh, given a user question, break it down to this thing. See, I don't like this much either. Let's try with this original question. Looks really good. We could use like regex or something, or I'd probably like have it respond with like JSON only. That's what Langchain does. Like it's like Langchain's response, because they use JSON mode, looks like that. So it's something that you can, parse out really easily. Which is fine. But this does bring me to, sort of the regardless of what your prompt looks like, one of the key ideas in general with this is that the GPT doesn't have any concept of the style of the information in your database, the type of information, other than you just saying there's videos and articles. Like it doesn't have a good idea of what a quality decomposed query looks like for this. It's guessing, and its guesses are okay, but there's nothing in this prompt that gives it any sort of guidance on based on what I know about my specific database and things like that, what actually works best. So what you really want to do is include some examples to guide the model towards a better idea of our specific use case. This is the same idea that, most of my prompting videos go over, which is providing examples or fine-tuning guides the model towards your specific goal output. The model itself doesn't have any idea that, we probably have an article that is specific to this question, or it doesn't have any idea that, we only like 2 subqueries and things like that. Now you can prompt for that in sort of this zero-shot nature, but it's going to be much more efficient to provide some examples of what a good subquery or decomposition task looks like for our specific use case. So if I provided some examples, position, let's do I'm gonna put 2 examples. The one thing you do want to do with your examples, subqueries. The one thing you want to have with your examples is decent variety, so that the model understands a little bit more of the relationship. If I only had examples of, queries that don't require decomposition, or I only had examples of queries that do provide or do require query decomposition, then I'm never going to be able to fully grasp the other side of that equation. So you want to provide as much data variance here as possible to show the model the range of the possible values that are required for this use case. So, this one, I'm trying to decide. I think we'll do this, like not required. for the ones that don't need it, and then for the ones that do need it, let's say I'm grabbing one. For the ones that do need it, just doing like the list format, I think that's perfectly fine. And GPT showed me that it does prefer the list format as much as possible. So let's go here, subqueries, and we'll do something like this. Do like a little list format here. Yeah, I'll do those. So there's a couple examples. You have access to, you're an expert converting questions into semantic search queries that allow us to better search a knowledge base. Knowledge base. I know it doesn't like that, but it's fine. Database. We're going to change this to knowledge base as well. Subqueries. I think that also will help as well, because you saw the format was very like question written, where we don't really need it to be question written. We just need it to be sort of query written from a semantic standpoint. In the example I showed with the long query and then the chunk, it doesn't matter if those subqueries are written as questions as much as they are just very topic focused or something like that. So let me run how to do. I want to think of another short one to see if it now gets that correct. How to still very question heavy. Create a prompt and how to. They're still kind of question heavy, which I don't love. For decomposition. Let's put another example. See if that helps. We're still getting these long, especially for a question like that just doesn't require too much. Let's put something in like this. Put another example. I try to keep my example count around 3 to 5. Especially like this early, like when I'm just testing stuff. I didn't prepare this piece ahead of time. I wanted to do it on the fly, see how well I do. So I don't know if this is the optimal approach, but I think it's fine. Subqueries. So there's one. There is 2. Now I think this is still. I think this is probably still going to be long with what we see. I have some ideas for that. So how to create a prompt. Question, subqueries. Okay, I don't mind that as much. It's better than it was. Because we really only should have one query. Now it's rewritten a little longer. Yeah, I don't hate it. Let's try another short one, see what we got. I actually don't mind that as much. I know it created two from that, but I think any of the chunks you would get back from what is Langchain. And then and then essentially the second one is that first question just written again. I actually don't mind that. If I if I did, based on my own knowledge of my use case, like I said, this is just an example use case, but if I knew from my specific use case that I don't need two searches to get to a retrieved chunk that makes sense for this question, then I could restructure it a little bit and go from there. But I actually don't, I actually kind of don't mind this. Let's try another one. One of the things that I want to drive home in general is this idea that, there's a lot of different ways to do this, for your specific use case where you have sort of a top line explanation of what you're doing. You have a little bit of information about the use case and the database and things like that. You have specific instructions. You'll always see with all my prompting ones. You'll have instructions and then some sort of like goal driven clarity. We call it goal state output definition, but clarifying what the goal is of the task for my specific domain as much as possible. And then you'll see like rules here, which are going to be use case specific. I actually like this rule that they used because I showed you before why that is, but examples is going to be a big part of this for something that is just so incredibly domain specific. You're going to want these here to be able to do that. So let's say we have this question. How to use what is Langchain lane graph? This is pretty good. I mean, this one is the exact one that we need. This I think is beneficial, but like I said, based on the use case, we might not need it. This is the second time we've put in a single topic question, and it's given us one of the subqueries being like an overarching goal. But that one that's partially driven by the model, two that's partially driven by this example, which the first one here you see is what is blah blah blah. I'm not surprised that we see that a bunch. But I think it's okay. Let's try another one here. This one's a little tricky. Let's see what we get here. This one I do like. So I'm looking at the example on my other screen. This is essentially exactly what I wanted. I wanted a what is for both of those so we can make sure that we can pull in chunks that explain that. And then I get one that is focused on the comparison of the two. This one is what's different, but sort of combining those two ideas together and finding chunks that are related to those two together. So I do actually really like this one. It's actually essentially exactly what Langchain has as their example goal subquery. The first two are exactly the same. The third one they put is this. They're pretty close. For an example run with a prompt that's a little bit different from the original one, I actually don't mind this too much. I want to put in another small one because we're really going to want to hone in the understanding of what queries need to be decomposed and which ones don't. So that's something that I would be constantly testing, especially when I saw that first time where it really struggled with looking at a query that didn't need to be decomposed, but was decomposing pretty heavily. Boom, perfect, 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 perfect. That is exactly what I wanted. I wanted this simple one to just be the same. I didn't want a bunch of random stuff. I wanted this small single topic query to just have one single idea. I don't need a bunch of them. This is perfectly fine. Yeah, that looks really good. I actually really like this one. If we look at our examples, we've got kind of a variety of stuff. I'm gonna change this too because I don't have any rules around that, so I should probably keep it the same. But we have a simple question comes in, how to do RAG, we get the same response. We get one with a little bit more, and our responses reflect that, they're a little bit different, and then we have one here with 3 subqueries, and I feel like we've covered the variety, the data variance, at a pretty high level. Now, for your specific use case, like I said, you needed more than this, right? Maybe you need for, if you're in like a very technical support bot or something like that, where the queries that are given are incredibly complex, maybe you'd want examples that show 4 or 5 subqueries, some things like that. But for this example, I actually think this one is really good. Let's see if I want to run anything else around this, but this actually looks pretty good. See if there's anything else I would change up here. No, I think it looks pretty good. The only other thing that I would be interested in testing is the other models, but in general, for something like query decomposition, smaller models, one, I think personally they perform better, but 2, this is added cost to your query cost. This is added runtime to your query runtime. So any way you can make that as small as possible for those 2 variables, you're going to be excited, your client's going to be excited, because you are adding another step to the pipeline, which will affect those 2 variables with runtime and cost. So as small and as quick as you can make this step, you should feel pretty good about. So this looks good. In this second video, I just wanted to go through up to this point, the prompt for this type of stuff, the examples for this type of stuff, some of the thought process and logic behind this type of stuff. But this looks really good. And if query decomposition is something that you believe your system needs for the type of use case, I think this is a really good starting point. You have your examples, so you have a little bit of guidance towards your specific use case. You have instructions that are clear. I'd say this is the one place you could probably play around with quite a bit, because this is just a one-liner that essentially explains the entire domain of your task. Domain being like the actual like business domain. So this is something that you could add to quite a bit. But yeah, I think this looks pretty good. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Part 3, we're going to do next. We're going to go through a little bit of augmentation. We're going to go through a much more in-depth breakdown of some of the code behind this stuff and things like that. But really wanted to just kind of get the feet wet with what does one of these prompts look like? What should you be doing to enhance it? And what are some of the results that you should see from this? So hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.